Welcome to the Business Growth Spotlight, where we are shining a light and talking with business leaders from all over the world to share their insights and expertise so we can grow together. I'm your host, Heidi, and I'm the co-founder of the Spotlight to Scale Accelerator, where we drive revenue for companies by making sure they are seen as the authority and go-to expert in their space, in their field, versus just another product or service. And I'm joined by today Stuart Chant, we're going to talk all about sales. And he is with Outsell Consulting. And I'm really excited about this conversation because we've been talking a little bit about behind the scenes, and I've already learned some gold nuggets for myself. So I'm really excited to be bringing them to you today. So welcome, Stuart, to the show. And I'm so excited to have you here with me.
Thanks, Heidi. It's a pleasure. Can't wait to talk to you.
I'm excited. So can you share a little bit tell us who you are, what you do, and a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, so I used to be a sales leader of a New York Stock Exchange public company, and I
Mm.
hired Outsell Consulting to come and fix my sales team. I had 150 sellers working with me at the time, but we didn't have a sales process. There was like no sales process. Maybe we had 150 sales processes, but no common language. So we hired Outsell Consulting. And I remember at the time, I was a young man, I was 43, and I was thinking I was pretty smart, Heidi. I thought, oh, they're pretty smart. Turns out I was a buffoon, and they showed up. They showed up, they were like the SWAT team. I was like, oh man, look at these guys. And I just kind of wanted to become one of them. So I ran away from corporate America and hung a shingle out and joined Outsell some 20 years ago.
Wow.
It's been fantastic. So, yeah, that's
I think you're far from a buffoon, but that's okay. But I love that you said that. It's really important that we understand who the experts are in our space, right? We can't be everything to everyone, which is important when it comes to business. So you could kind of just shine the light on sometimes when we start a business or we're an entrepreneur, like we want to be everything to everyone, and we can't. We need to find our expertise and our zone of genius. And that necessarily wasn't your zone of genius at the time, but now you've joined Outsell, right? So how has it been since what is your role with Outsell, and what is your zone of genius?
Yeah, thanks. I was reading Rick Rubin's book, and Rick Rubin, the record producer, and he said, "Notice the things that you notice that no one else notices." And that thing for me is discovery questions and building rapport. And a quick story. I was in Washington, D.C., and I had 25, 26 people in the class, and I was training them. And I had them stand up and pair off and just do a simple conversation thing. Just before I said, guys, what kind of questions should we ask? Should we ask open-ended or closed-ended questions? And of course, they all said, oh, we should ask open-ended questions, Stu. They may not have said Stu, but whatever. And I said, there's the correct answer. And then I had them team up, work for 3 minutes, one person asking questions, the other answering. And I walked around the room and just listened to the questions they're asking. And they were all, it was, are you, can you, could you, do you, did you, have you, is it, would you, will you? And I wrote them all up on the board and just gave them some awareness of the actual questions they're asking, because we naturally ask close-ended questions. And salespeople never believe me, but I've done this on 4 continents around the world. We always ask close-ended questions, and it takes a lot of work to move to open-ended questions.
Mm-hmm. So the key is open-ended questions.
Yeah. So I
Okay.
spend my life helping people start asking questions begins with what, or tell me, or talk to me about. And of course, tell me and talk to me about a command statements. You're telling people what to do. But it's a great way of getting people talking, and obviously then your mission is to keep them talking.
Yeah,
That's what
because people love what are people's favorite thing to do?
so I think
Talk about
probably
themselves.
talking about themselves.
Right? And they can only talk about themselves when we keep having open-ended questions to dig deeper and deeper and deeper. And the deeper we go, just like we're going to talk about, I know at some point when we get to when we get to objections, you're going to typically the first objection is not the real reason. We get to go deeper and deeper. But before we ever even get to that, why is building rapport such a critical skill in sales, and how can sales professionals develop it authentically? Because being on the other side of the phone or the Zoom call or whatever, we can feel like we have this wall up, right? We want to feel like the other person is authentic and genuine and really cares about what our needs are. So how can we do that authentically?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, if you can fake authenticity, you can make a fortune, Heidi.
Mm,
But I think it's hard to do, right?
yeah.
You've got to be sincere. So the only way to do that is to actually be curious. I
Mm,
started listening about 17 years ago. I've been married 30 years. How I only started listening 17 years, I have no idea, but God bless my wife. Um, but when you start listening, you find that everyone you meet has a fascinating story. All you got to do is ask them questions to uncover what it is.
mm.
I love that. I love the fact that you can just ask anyone questions. It's just so interesting. So be curious, I guess, is the answer. But
Yeah,
also
you be interested, right?
be interested, not interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I get all these calls. I do a lot of referral work, and I get calls from sales teams saying, "Oh, can you come and help us address concerns and close?" And in all of these calls, all of these projects have gone out on, it's never addressing concerns and closing. That is never the issue. It's how they open the sale,
Mm,
right? To your point, it's how they build rapport, how they ask questions, because that's where the sale is won. It's not in the closing. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, that's so true because the closing becomes so much easier when the guard is down on the other person on the other side of the conversation. So if you can ask questions, get them to know, like, and trust you, right? And we don't not always have a lot of time to do that. But if you are sincere and authentic in asking the questions and really wanting to know more about them, then it makes that closing, when you make the offer, it makes it so much easier because now they're like, oh yeah, this person knows me.
Yeah.
They get me. So do you have a story or an example of someone, of salesperson that you've worked with that is dramatically or not dramatically, that's not a word, drastically improved their success? I'm making up words along the way. They've improved their success by mastering these rapport building techniques that you're sharing are so important.
Yeah, I have a lot of them. I mean, I can think, I was just working with a guy called Chris. Chris works at a transportation company down in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Roll Tide. He works down there and he sells advertising to trucking companies to get, they're trying to hire drivers for trucking companies, obviously a big business. And when I first met Chris, he was doing about 50 grand a month, 50,000 a month. And it was kind of, average salespeople doing 50 to 80. He, after 18 months of working with us, he went up to 750,000. All he did was, it was
Yeah.
interesting. All he did was do what we say, which is fascinating, right? You would think, right? You lead a training session, you haven't practiced stuff, you haven't worked on it, uh, and they would do it. But of course, we don't. We don't all just do that.
Right.
But he did. He applied everything we said, and Chris was absolutely killing it as a result. Just, his ability to get people talking and keep them talking was night and day. He found out, he realized he was asking close-ended questions. So he was getting very short answers. So he thought his customers wouldn't speak to him. They were
Mm.
uncommunicative. But it turns out he was just asking bad questions. I think from this, I can share a few things that I do, that we teach to get people talking.
Yeah.
But if you're in a boring conversation, it's probably your fault, right? Because you could ask better questions. So we taught him open-ended questions, of course, and then double clicks. I don't know if you know this term, but one of the common language things we teach is double clicks. That's where you ask an open-ended question, someone says something, and you take one or two words in their answer and you form a new question.
Mm.
Not only does it make the other person feel like they're leading the conversation, you're using their keywords, but it's also proves that you're listening.
Yeah,
Because
they feel heard. They
yeah,
feel heard.
it builds trust. You're not moving from one subject to the other. You're supporting what they said. You're not shifting away from. So that kind of thing makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And then
Amazing.
there's
So go ahead.
no, I was going to say there's another one you can do. And what else? I love it. As people stop talking, you can just say, what else? And they'll keep going. And there's a reason for that, right? On average, we can talk 125 words a minute. I think New York, they can talk 150, but on average, 125 words a minute. But think how fast we can think. We can think like 1,250 words a minute. We can think really quickly. So if you ask a prospect, a question is going to take a minute to answer, they're going to give you 125 words, but we know there's like 1,125 words left over. So there's always more. You can always say, what else? And they'll keep talking. And it's sometimes gold dust because they haven't had time to think about it. So I think double clicks, what else? Really, really useful for salespeople.
Hmm. So also, how important is the pause? Because, I just did it. I thought you had answered the question, and I went to ask you a question, and you chimed in because you weren't finished. So that was my lack of not knowing that you were complete. So how effective is the pause in going? Because a lot of times the pause is good for like making, allowing them to know you're listening. And two, once you pause and there's how long should the pause be? How effective is it? And how many times do you see that where they keep talking? They'll continue talking because maybe they're feeling like they have to finish. But when we pause and we just kind of like let that open space happen without rushing into another question, they're going to give us more information. Is that something that is important when you're talking to salespeople too?
Yeah, it's a fascinating subject because I think if you and I were in the same room, it wouldn't be a thing, right? Because our perception is so good when we're close to people. We know if they're going to speak or not. We know when my turn's up. But on Zoom, we're learning a whole new set of skills. So we teach like facilitation for Zoom is where you get to a point, you pass the microphone. You're like, oh, hey, let me pause there and come to you. And that's probably, if we were in a meeting, we'd probably be doing that because we're just having a conversation. So
Hmm.
different. So I think it's different in person or on Zoom. What are your
Or even
thoughts?
on the phone call, right? Because you can't even see the person on the phone call. That would make it even more challenging.
Yeah, I think
So yeah.
salespeople have a difficult time, right? It's a really, really tough job when people have never had so much information, never as many choices. You know, the one thing salespeople have to do is make sure the person they're speaking to likes them. Because,
Hmm.
and if you want people to like you, you've got to get them talking about themselves, which I think is counterintuitive to everything we've ever thought.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've talked about being personable and building that rapport, and you're sharing with us how to do that. But there needs to be a balance between being buddy buddy and building that rapport and then getting down to business and moving them towards the yes of taking action and closing that sale. So how can sales professionals create that balance between being, personable and then getting down to business efficiently to where taking the call where they need it to go to get it toward that close of the yes or the no?
Yeah, I think it's probably two things that spring to mind if you ask that question. First thing is obviously setting up an agenda for the call. I think
Mm,
that's the one thing I get to see. I think no exaggeration. I've seen thousands of sales interactions because I get called out to evaluate private equity companies if they're going to buy a sales team. They want to know what it's like. So I watch thousands of sales interactions. The one thing I think would make a difference in transition what you describe is an agenda. It's like, you do the nice little pleasantries, how's the weather and all that kind of stuff. And then you get, right, thanks for getting together, Heidi. Really appreciate it. I think the purpose of the meeting today is to do this. And then you mention a benefit to them and you say, we're going to discuss three things and you name what they are. And then you say, what else do you want to make sure we talk about today? And I think that's the most important thing about an agenda. what else do you want to make sure we talk about today? Most salespeople, in my experience, they say, is there anything else you'd like to add? Do you want to add something to the agenda? And of course, the answer to that question, always no.
No.
Close ended. It's a guaranteed no. So start saying, what else do you want to make sure we talk about? And it's absolutely night and day. 50% of the time they give you something and it's gold dust. So that's my advice is use an agenda.
So you just brought up something which I think is really key. And you had just said, after the pleasantries. So can we talk about the pleasantries? Because that wasn't really one of my questions, but I want to talk about that because that could come across very fake if we do it wrong. Like talking about the weather. Everybody asks, like you mentioned, like talking about the weather. Sometimes it's important to talk about that. Like it's
Yeah.
worked for me when I've been in storms. I'm in Florida, as we had talked about. You're in California, I'm in Florida. We have weather issues at certain times of the year. Well, I will bring that up because it could be a barrier to my internet going on in my area or something like that. But when on a day-to-day basis, like in a general call, what do you suggest for people to be different when it comes to pleasantries so they're not falling amongst all the other people that we're talking to on a day-to-day basis? It's like, okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the answer is strategic rapport. I think
Mm.
strategic rapport, Heidi, and that's where you know something about the person that they love, because all of us have things that are near and dear to us. I think mine is stand-up comedy. I love stand-up comedy. If anyone knows that,
Cool.
and I'll tell you what happened. I was in a meeting with someone. This guy had set the meeting up and he said, "Oh, thanks for getting together, Stu. The purpose of the meeting is this." And he laid out the agenda. He said, "But before we get going, I've got to ask you, who's your favorite stand up comedian?" And I knew what he was doing. I knew it, but I was hooked. I couldn't help answering it. I
You
had to answer it. What's
That's
your
perfect.
subject, Heidi? What's the subject you have to talk about if someone asks you? What is that?
Well, mine's pretty easy because like I wouldn't know you like stand-up comedy unless we did a lot research, like unless somebody needs to research you for that. And if I'm not sharing that on social media, nobody's gonna know that about me. But if somebody sees my dog walk through and they bring up, I'm hooked. Like, and that's the thing. Like I'm just
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it's super easy. Like kids, kids, my teenagers, if you have teenagers where we can chat about the awesomeness of it and the challenges of it, the scariness of it. And then dogs, yeah, that's my whole go-to. So I love that. And I love stand-up comedy too. So I would love to know who your favorite is. Who's your favorite, Stuart?
Oh my God. I think Jimmy Carr probably. Jimmy Carr is probably up there. I love Jimmy Carr. He's an English guy. Google him if you haven't seen him. He's probably I think he's incredibly funny.
I'm gonna have to definitely check him out because I watch every now and then, but I can't even think of anybody off the top of my head. I have a ton that I'm of. Kathleen Madigan, she
Yeah.
cracks me up. She
Yeah.
cracks me up. And there's so many other ones, but I can't think of the names off the top of my head. I watch them all the time too, and it just like their names escape me. But oh, that's so cool. And you're right, you know what they're doing, but it doesn't matter. It's
No,
already,
it
you're
doesn't
grateful
matter.
that they took that time. Yeah.
I was leading a training in London with a very large search engine company, probably one of the biggest. Anyway, I had to speak to the guy who was running that, and he was running Europe and North Africa. And he's a really busy guy. I had 15 minutes, and I found out he was a lifelong Chelsea fan. So he's a huge Chelsea supporter. And so I laid out the agenda and I said to him, "Hey, before we get going, I've got to ask you, what do you think that the new manager is going to do with Chelsea?" And of course, this really busy guy gave me 5 minutes and we became fast friends. And when I got to London to do the training, he made sure he was there and he said hello to me, which was really nice. So strategic rapport that's my recommendation. Find out something about them, drop that into the conversation. You're guaranteed, if you're curious, you're guaranteed to have a good conversation. It will help.
Yeah, that research matters. So do your research. That's key. If you can take the time to do that, if you're building, then maybe it's you that needs to do that. If you're actually in the mode of scaling, then maybe it's your team that can do that. But getting deeper than anybody else would is a great way of setting yourself apart and make you different from everybody else out there because you're not the only one that is trying to get this company to work with you, right?
No.
So, or bit person to work with you. So really doing that research is key. I love that.
That's good.
What did you
Good.
want to share?
I was going to say the only other thing that sprung to mind when you asked that question was a thing that we call the hammock. I don't know if you know familiar with it, but I was in
Oh.
Chicago, working with a nursing college, and we'd done half the training course, and it was a telephone job. So they would spend 21 minutes like building rapport, asking questions, doing discovery, and it was I was listening to a call after first half of the training, and this woman did it was perfect. 21 minutes through, it was absolutely perfect. And then she said, "Let me tell you something about the college." And then she went and she spoke for 21 minutes, non-stop, 21 minutes. And then she said, "Do you have any questions?" Think about that. If someone gave you 21 minutes of information, and it's, "Do you have any questions?" So one thing that we work on is the hammock, and it says neuroscience says you can only give information for 2 minutes, 3 minutes max. You've got to stop and say, "Hey, let me pause there and come to you for your thoughts," because when you start talking, you've got 70% of their attention, and that's certain. Of course, with you, Heidi, it probably goes up, but when I speak, it goes down. And it goes down to 20%. And when you stop speaking, it goes to 100%. So it's kind of this hammock shape. So when people are firmly in the hammock, you don't have their attention. And you
Mm.
want their attention. So you want to get them back to 70% or get their attention back. So every 2 or 3 minutes, just stop and say, "Oh, let me pause there and get your thoughts. How's this sounding so far? What do you think about this?" And you kind of do this and it brings them back up. And when you start talking again, you've got 70% of their attention again. So overall, you're getting more attention for your sales pitch.
Mm.
Makes it interactive. So they think again that they're taking part and they're actually there. They're not just an audience member. Much more fun. What are your thoughts, Heidi?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you shared the hammock method. I didn't even know that was a thing. And that's so insightful and so cool to learn about. So thank you for sharing that for sure. I never really, yeah, the more we talk, the less people listen, right? Especially when they're the ones that are coming onto the call with us for a reason. We need to keep asking those questions and keeping them engaged. So when it comes to shining the light on us and our product or our service and how to help them, we can't forget to keep asking those questions. So at the end of the day, what I'm learning from the big takeaway from me that I'm getting from you is learning from you is keep being curious, keep asking questions, keep being interested in where they are and taking the temperature, right? No matter where you are on the call, taking the temperature. So you are emphasizing the art or the power of asking the right questions. So what are some of the most powerful or discovery questions that we can ask when it comes to sales?
I think there's certainly questions that begin with what. I highly recommended. Uh, Tell me, talk to me about, and maybe using some what we call open-ended question starters. That's
Mm.
what I might say, you know, walk me through how you currently do it. Describe for me, clarify to me, explain to me, give me a picture. Those kind of open-ended question starters are guaranteed to get the other person to give you lots of words. And that's what you want. Again, if you want people to like you, you got to get them talking about themselves. So open-ended question starters get people talking. And you'll, and I think this is my biggest piece of advice, and this is really about listening. When your customer, when the prospect is talking to you, you're going to have a million thoughts coming into your brain. And my advice is let them go. You will know what to say when it's your turn. And I
Mm.
think it's so important because 25% of the way into the customer's answer, we start thinking about our next question. It's the wrong thing to do. Just keep listening. Just know that you will know what to say when it's your turn. Just let all the thoughts go and just listen.
Stuart, that right there is gold because I can share with you when I'm doing just for example, podcast interviews. I'll be talking with somebody and I love this to be very conversational. So they'll be sharing an answer with me and I'm like pulling nuggets from that. And I'm not a writer because I want to be focused on the conversation. And if I'm doing something else, I can't be focused fully and present. So I'll be listening and I'm like, oh, I can ask that question. By the time they finish, I'm already on three more questions. And then sometimes I blinked and I can't even come up with the question. Like it's just been because I've been so focused on the question. So I love that because at the end of the day, pretty much with the last thing they said, I'm guessing is one of the probably most important things that they've said. And then you can go deeper on that. And that's just so key and really being present. And I've found that the most effective salespeople, quote, if you know, a lot of people don't like that word, but salesperson is the person that one could ask those deep questions and is truly present listening and not writing the whole time, taking notes and all the things. I know there's a place there's a place for that and there's an importance to that, but really being able to focus on who you're with and listening is key. I think the person who can listen the most effectively wins at the end of the day.
I hope so. I was at a party and the host of the party was chatting. There's 10 of us listening to this story. And 25% of the way in the conversation, she said the word Hawaii. And I've been to Hawaii a lot. I've been there 20 times. I used to run a business there. And I know it. And you know, this is how our brains work, right? Here's Hawaii. And it starts going, hey, Stu, hey, you could tell this story. You could talk about Haleakala or Maui or the Big Island. And it just start pinging around in your brain, right? Meanwhile, she's still talking. Although, her lips are still moving and noise is coming out the front of her face, but I'm not
Right.
hearing any of it. It's just
Right.
washing over me, and I'm just thinking about, I'll tell this funny story, and I'm thinking about my response. And then 75% of the way in the conversation, I think, oh my God, I better pay attention. It might be a quiz. She might say, what do you think, Stu? And then you're in that awkward kind of. So I thought, pay attention. So I got back to listen to what she was saying. And she was talking about Cleveland. And I was like, oh my God, I've got nothing on Cleveland. What am I going to do with my Hawaii story now? Hey, you were talking about Hawaii just, you can't be that guy, right? So just let it go. I should have been listening the whole time.
Yes, let it go. I love that you said, like, and this is a key into sales, like really trusting yourself. And like you said, you're going to know the questions that you need to ask when you're fully present and listening. Just trust yourself that you're going to be ready with a question when the time comes, but be fully engaged and present in the conversation. And again, typically, like there's so many questions that you can pull out of that, but at the end of the day, the last thing they said is if you just expand upon that and dive into that, you're going to be good, but be present for the whole thing. So let's talk about that deeper because I know for me when I was doing sales a lot when in my coaching business, like there's nerves, especially when you're a beginner at enrollment calls or in sales calls, there's nerves that go along with it. And we can stay very surface. So how can sales professionals go beyond the surface level responses to uncover a client's true needs and pain points and the true solution that they want, because that called objections, people are going to come with objections, and typically we need to go deeper. But when you're just starting out or you're not knowing how to go deeper, how can we go deeper to uncover that?
Love that question. And it's so true, right? The amount of sales presentations I see where it's just surface level.
Mm.
It's the customer says, well, I think I'd like to resolve the issue in this way. And whatever they say, the salesman's like, oh yeah, we've got a thing, we've got a widget that does that. And they're off, they're on a pitch. And I'm always like, oh my God, can't we dig a little bit deeper? Just like just say to the customer, like you could try the five whys, right? The five whys, when the customer says so, you go, well, why is that happening? And they'll think about it and they'll give you an answer. And you say, well, oh, why is that happening? And if you ever get to the fifth why, I guarantee they'll be crying, Heidi. Come on. I mean, you can't get because it's so deep. Each
Right.
why goes so deep. So I would say, ask why. Why?
Mm.
Yeah. Now, the five whys is a really useful framework for going deeper and understanding the real problem. I had one recently that moved from what the customer thought, um, what the customer thought it was to what it really was. And they found out it was their sales manager with the problem. They thought they needed sales training. No, they probably needed a new sales manager. That was it. But it took asking some questions to find out. And I think that's something we can do. We're useful for that. We don't want to take every job. We want to take a job we can succeed at, right?
Mhm.
We don't want our reputation turned to custard. So we ask questions, and if you don't need us, we'll tell you what you do need, or you'll figure out yourself.
Yeah. So I have one more question for you, Stuart, because we've talked about asking questions, and at the end of the day, that's the key. That's what I'm getting from talking with you is we've gotta ask questions. So if you're feeling like there's an objection and you're staying surface level, it's a matter of asking those five whys. Like go deeper and deeper. Well, why is that? Why is that? Why is that? And I totally get that because when I worked with entrepreneurs on building their businesses, I would say, why do you want to even do this? Like, why do you want to start a business? Because it's not going to be an easy road. I want to make money. Okay, well, why do you want to make money? Because money is great. But at the end of the day, when things get tough, we've got to go deeper into that why in order to uncover the thing that's really going to push us forward. And if you want to make money, you can go drive Uber, you can go get a job, like you can do anything to make money, right? But what is it that the money is going to do for you? And asking that why five times really gets to the core of it. And that's where it gets to that why that makes you cry, that emotional piece that's really going to keep you going when those days get hard or when you're just not feeling like you got it in you. And that's why no matter what you're selling somebody, whether it's a product or service, they need to keep using it or doing it or whatever in order to get the result that they want. And if we don't go deeper into that why, they're not going to continue using it and get the results, right? And a good salesperson truly wants them to get the results. So let's talk about how to feel natural in this process because we can ask the questions. What strategies can a salesperson use to ensure that their discovery process, moving through this process that you're sharing with us today, feels natural? It feels like it's just, they're asking the questions naturally. They're not feeling salesy. They're not feeling uncomfortable. So it feels like a natural process versus like an interrogation.
Hmm. I think, yeah, that's a good question. I think the answer is to not act like a salesperson, right? Act like a problem solver. Like, people have problems that they want solved. And I ride with tons of salespeople who have really, really good products, but they act like salespeople. And it's just, I think it turns people off. But when someone acts like a problem solver and an expert, I think that's fascinating. And it just gives them confidence, and the customer gets confidence, and they just know they're dealing with someone who's a bit different. They're not trying to sell them something. We're trying to solve a big issue here. That's my advice.
I think that's perfect advice because literally you are a problem solver. You're not a salesperson. And people they have they're coming to you because they have a problem. At the end of the day, like you said, we're problem solvers. What is
Hmm.
the problem that they have? How do you solve it? And can you effectively solve it? And be honest if you can't. This gets to be if it's not going to work for them, that's how you become more trusted too. Like, hey, we don't have that, we can't solve this problem. So, Stuart, how can we connect with you? Somebody's listening and they're like, oh my gosh, I need more information for Stuart. I want to connect with him. He's amazing. How do we reach out to you?
You can certainly reach me through LinkedIn, Stuart Chant on LinkedIn. I've got 9,500 connections on there, so you can certainly reach me there, and I post a lot there. I've also got stuartchant.com, and I've got outsellconsulting.com. So I do my work through most of my work through Outsell Consulting. So that's where they can reach me, outsellconsulting.com. We have a new website coming out this week. So
Oh, yeah?
yeah, we
Tell us
do. Yeah,
about that.
it's we have our team. We have instructional designers, we have writers, we have a couple of AI guys because we're doing a ton of stuff with AI now. So we've got some Stanford AI people, um, and we're also working on behavior and habits with customers. So we know no one really wants sales training, right? They want behavior change.
Mhm.
That's what we work on. So we work on the person and then we work on the process. And AI is being enormously useful in this area. So we're doing a ton of work there.
How do you see AI if you have an extra minute, how do you see AI being like now how are you guys going to be navigating AI in the future and using it to your benefit?
Well, we know that AI is really, really good at spotting patterns. So
Mm,
one of the things that interests us at the moment is, and all the private equity companies you work for, is salespeople are largely self-directed, right? They're deciding where they should call on. So if they've got, you know, 800 customers or 2,000 customers, they're deciding where to go. AI's probably a much, much better judge of where they should go if AI's got all the information it needs. So that's the thing we're focused on. Can we help the salesperson before the call by telling the salesperson where to go? Can we help the salesperson then during the call? And how can we help the salesperson after the call? So we
mhm.
think, helping salespeople put notes in the CRM, AI can do that. And
Yeah.
it can bring down resistance, because salespeople have an awful lot of resistance about keeping notes. They always think it's, fill out the form and please the teacher, but it's really their benefit.
Yeah.
But if we can make it easier to do, the chances are they'll do it. So that's what we're working on. And we know that, you know, we know simplicity changes behavior.
Yes. Yeah. And making everything as simple as possible is key. And I like that you're using AI to help them because yes, note taking can be frustrating, but we haven't even had time to talk into this aspect of it. And so we might have to bring you back on, Stuart. But the fortune's in the follow-up. And the more notes that you take, the more information you have, the more effective you're going to be in the follow-up because most of the times it takes how many touches does it take? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 touches sometimes, maybe even more sometimes for someone to be a yes. And that information that you have is going to help you in what Stuart's been sharing with you this entire time about building that rapport, building that relationship and knowing and diving deeper into the questions. Because when you're following up and you have all this information that you've gathered and you're talking into it, they're going to know that you were listening and that you actually care. And that's going to set you apart from other people trying to get their business too. So I love that. Absolutely. So thank you, Stuart, for being here with me today. Go connect with Stuart. Go check him out on LinkedIn. Go connect with him. Go to outsellconsulting.com, stuartchant.com. He's amazing. I've had the best time here with you today. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being a yes to us. And is there anything that you wanted to share that I didn't get to ask you or touch on, Stuart?
I don't think so. I think this is fantastic. What a great forum. Thank you for starting this show. It's fascinating, Heidi. Thanks for great questions. I think you did a wonderful job. And I really enjoyed it. So thank you. Yeah, this is
I've
brilliant.
enjoyed it as well, and I'm so grateful for your time and your wisdom and your expertise. I know I've gathered a lot of great information from you and gold nuggets. Thank you for being a yes to this new podcast. This is, we have our Bishi, but this is our new one. We're so excited about and thrilled that you are a yes to being here. And thank you for listening today and joining us for the Business Growth Spotlight podcast. If you feel your business is blending in and you're ready to grow and your visibility, be seen as the expert in your space and scale to the next level, then go grab your free Spotlight to Scale blueprint. You can go grab it at spotlighttoscale.com/blueprints. Again, that's spotlighttoscale.com-blueprint, and it's a free, easy download. In the meantime, go reach out to Stuart Chant on LinkedIn, stuartchant.com, and outsellconsulting.com. We will have all of Stuart's contact information as well as his biography. All the information you need from him is in our show notes. Please go check him out there. If you're listening on a podcast platform, if you've heard Stuart and I's conversation on any of the podcast platforms, please leave us a review. Let Stuart know you heard him here. And if you're listening to us and watching us on YouTube, please subscribe. Have a great rest of your day. Stuart, thank you again for your time. Thank you for listening to us, and we will see you on the next episode of the Business Growth Spotlight.